the truth about gambling, why gamblers always lose money and go bankrupt. The Life Mindset channel greets everyone. Gambling is often portrayed as a form of entertainment, but it's crucial to recognize that it should never be overdone. No matter how long or how often you play, the odds are stacked against you. You simply can't outsmart the casino because they take a cut from each game. To put it simply, games that take less of your money are better. But even in Baccarat, a 5% commission is deducted per game. If you play 40 rounds and neither win nor lose, essentially breaking even, you're still losing money. The more you bet, the more you lose. I do not endorse or teach people to squander their money on gambling. This perspective comes from Stanley Ho, a prominent figure known as the King of Gambling. Ho, a billionaire businessman and the founder and chairman of SJM Holdings, which owns 19 casinos in Macau, has seen immense success. But what exactly contributed to his success? It can be traced back to his motto, "You don't gamble, you win." Stanley Ho's view on gambling was straightforward. Avoid it entirely. If you don't gamble, you won't lose. Not only did he personally refrain from gambling, but he also prohibited his family members from doing so. He understood that out of every 10 bets, one is typically a loss. In a television interview, he openly shared, "I always advise people to treat gambling as a form of entertainment. You shouldn't play too much because even if you play more, you won't necessarily win, but the casino will still take its commission." He also acknowledged that no matter how wealthy you are, you can't outsmart the casino. The gambling industry holds a secret that few are aware of. They aren't afraid of players winning. They fear that players will stop coming back. The casino understands that as long as a player keeps playing, they will eventually lose everything. So, why do players keep playing? Is it because they lose their sense of reasoning, get influenced by drugs, or simply become addicted to gambling? Gambling addiction is a natural vulnerability, especially among people from Eastern cultures. Along with prostitution and drugs, gambling is one of the 3 major vices in society, and gambling is the most destructive to families. Even though drug addiction is incredibly harmful to billionaires, the current price of drugs means they may not lose all their wealth. However, once they fall into the gambling trap, even if they have millions or billions, they can end up with nothing due to the accumulating debts. Remember, whether it's online or offline gambling, both have the same destructive power. Some people may leave the table after losing all their money, maintaining some level of discipline. However, others return and borrow money to keep playing, and this is not an uncommon occurrence. Why does this happen? Let me share some real-life experiences about gambling that may make you reflect on this. The first story is about a man named Lamin, who suffered greatly because of his gambling. In 2011, Lamin began betting on football. He initially wagered 10 million VND on a match and unexpectedly won 80 million. The most frightening aspect of gambling is the lack of understanding about the value of money and the disregard for the value of hard work. In less than 3 months, Lamin had earned over 1 billion VND from an initial investment of nearly 200 million. Despite working hard for an entire year, he could barely save 100 million, but within a short period, he had amassed a small fortune. Lamin decided to quit his stable job at a large construction company to focus solely on football betting, which marked the beginning of his financial downfall. All his plans and strategies for cutting losses were disregarded when he began losing, desperately trying to recover his money. But this was just the illusion of a gambling addict. In the end, after only 3 months of winning over 1 billion VND, Lamin lost everything. At this point, he was no longer interested in anything, not even looking for another job, despite receiving multiple offers from companies. He refused to work, and even basic tasks like eating and paying bills became increasingly difficult. The scariest part was that Lamin had completely rejected the value of hard work. He had lost over 3 billion VND, including 2 billion that he had borrowed from his parents and the bank. This massive debt, combined with his desperate attempts to recover his losses, pushed him toward madness and self-destruction. He started borrowing money from loan sharks with interest rates as high as 3% per month. Within just 6 months, Lamin had lost everything. At this point, his credit cards could no longer cover his financial losses. The banks were preparing to sue him for overdue payments. Lamin had to pay over 200 million VND each month, with more than 70 million VND just for interest. If he had opened up to his family, borrowed money from friends, and sought help to quit gambling, he might have still had a chance to turn his life around. But he didn't. Instead, he secretly sold his house, paid off his debts, and was left with just 200 million VNDs. He then hid in a hotel for about a month, turning off all communication devices, and continued gambling. In his mind, he believed that he just needed to win back at least 2 billion VND to buy a small house and restart his life. A month later, he had only 100 million VND left. Feeling unable to face his family, he wrote a letter, transferred the remaining money to his mother, and then went to the top floor of the hotel to face his fate. Lamin despised himself. While gambling, he wasn't afraid of anything, but now he was terrified. On the night he had gathered the courage to face his fate, his parents had tracked him down using his booking information. When he returned home, Lamin stayed in bed for 2 months, doing nothing. His family didn't blame him much. About a year later, when the tragedy had passed, property prices had increased by over 3 billion VND. His parents, who had worked tirelessly to buy a house for him, now had to bear the heavy consequences of their son's actions. In just 2 or 3 short years, a well-off family had fallen into dire straits. After 6 months of struggling, Lamin finally decided to quit gambling and restart his life. But the lack of awareness of the value of hard work over the years made it difficult for him to begin anew. He lived with his parents in the countryside and worked a job that paid less than 10 million VND a month. The vast gap between his previous life and his current situation, coupled with peer pressure, made him consider that maybe suicide was the only way out. At the age of 30, Lamin had no house, no assets. He was completely broke due to gambling, and his marriage had fallen apart. After 14 years of neglect, all he knew was gambling and contemplating suicide. But one day, his father entered his room and said, "Son, let's go back to the old city and start over. Find a small job, and things will improve. Your mother and I will support you. Don't worry about the past anymore. We've decided to help you buy a small apartment with our pension and rental income." Finally, Lamin decided to quit gambling and rebuild his life. He understood that if he still had access to money, he wouldn't be able to control himself and would inevitably fall back into gambling. So, every month when he received his salary, he transferred the money to his mother and only asked for 300,000 VND per day for food. As of now, Lamin has been free from gambling for 14 months. While his savings are just enough for him to watch a football match or buy a small room in a big city, he can now talk to his parents with peace of mind and face himself in the mirror. He hopes that, in the remainder of his life, he can atone for all the mistakes he made. Before we dive deeper into the topic of gambling, don't forget to follow the channel to learn more about the truths of money and help you quickly achieve financial freedom. The second case is about my older brother, who migrated to Macau and worked in the gambling industry for many years. With his extensive knowledge, he can answer the question, why do so many people, even though they know gambling can destroy their families and lives, still fall into it? It's because of human nature. People always desire more. Workers want more money. Lovers want more affection. People striving for progress want perfection. Even those who are content with their normal lives still dream of a life without setbacks. My brother has interacted with many gamblers who possess assets that most ordinary people can only dream of. A single night of losses for them could equal the entire lifetime savings of an average person. Some business owners would rather risk their money gambling than pay overdue salaries to their employees. The real customers of a casino are not the small-time gamblers, but those at the top of the food chain, those who control the lives of ordinary workers. My brother once shared several examples of his customers to help you better understand the essence of these gamblers. The first type of gambler is the risk taker. The case my brother encountered involved a young man, only 30 years old, who would visit Macau once a month, bringing 5 to 10 billion VND with him each time. Initially, he would bet 1 to 1.5 billion VND per round. If he won, he would continue betting the same amount. If things were going well, he might even bet 3 billion VND. If he had only a few billion left, he wouldn't hesitate to bet it all. From start to finish, his gambling sessions rarely took more than 20 minutes. Either he would win 10 to 15 billion VND, or he would lose everything. For him, gambling was simply a form of excitement. What he cared about was not how much he won, but the thrill, the rapid heartbeat, and the ultimate joy of winning, feeling as if the world was on his side, as though fate had chosen him. For him, gambling was a way to experience victory, as though the universe was in his favor. It's a feeling few people ever experience. But casinos don't fear customers like him. You can win hundreds of times, but one massive loss will erase both your initial capital and your winnings. People like him will never accept losing. In business, he might be very successful, but in the casino, he will ultimately be a failure. The second type of gambler is the dependent gambler. This story is about a businessman from the countryside, around 50 years old. He would visit the casino and bring 7 billion VN each time. His betting strategy was very steady. He didn't rush, and he didn't get overly excited. He would place small bets, usually only in the tens of millions of VND. But if he won, he would reinvest the winnings to keep betting. Over time, he managed to win continuously for an entire month. Sometimes, he would win several hundred million VND, and sometimes 3 billion VND. He rarely ever lost. However, when his losses exceeded 200 million VND, he would change into a completely different person. He became extremely anxious and impulsive, placing bets of hundreds of millions in a single round. Once he had regained his capital, he would return to placing smaller bets. One day, after several consecutive losses, he found himself in a desperate state. He began betting billions of VND and lost everything. Eventually, he even mortgaged his personal assets to continue gambling. In just 1 week, he lost over 70 billion VND. He once said, "At the casinos in Macau, if you're not too greedy, you can win big." But looking back, my company only makes about 10 to 15 billion VND in profit a year. Yet after just 1 week of gambling in Macau, I could have made that much money. The dangerous thing about gambling is that it makes you believe all your previous efforts are worthless. You begin to lose the motivation to earn money through hard work. It also leads you to think of avoiding life's struggles, which can ultimately destroy you. Gambling is so destructive that it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking money comes easily. The third type of gambler is the empty, aimless gambler. This is the story of two men I'll refer to as Mr. C and Mr. B. Both were high-rolling customers, each owning assets worth hundreds of millions. Yet, it's hard to believe that they spent more than 20 days a month gambling in Macau. To stay for extended periods, they didn't hesitate to change their passports to Filipino ones. Mr. C would often play at MGM, sitting in front of the machines for 12 hours straight without feeling bored, even eating at the casino. Meanwhile, Mr. D enjoyed baccarat and spent much of his time at the table. For them, winning money wasn't the real joy. Even if they lost, they didn't care much. Once, Mr. C told Mr. D that the slot machines were bottomless pits. No matter how much you put in, it's never enough. Mr. D asked, "If you know that, why do you keep playing?" Mr. C replied, "Because there's nothing else that interests me." Even my brother couldn't understand this. They had so much money and could do so many things. Why waste it all at the casino? But later, I realized that we often get the wrong idea about wealthy and successful people. We think they are like Steve Jobs, Jack Ma, or Warren Buffett. But the reality is that some of them, once they have too much money, no longer know what to do with it. They have everything: luxuries, privileges, and all that life has to offer. They're satisfied with the money they've made. They think, why should I donate to charity? This money was earned by me. After that, they turn to gambling. After all, they don't need the money. But behind the facade of indulgence at the gambling table lies an empty soul. Eventually, Mr. C went into debt for tens of billions, and Mr. D continued to drown in gambling. These stories reflect the true nature of gambling addiction. Now, I will talk about the external factors that influence this. Anyone who has been to Macau knows that casinos offer many tempting deals to encourage you to return. They provide you with membership cards, allowing you to earn points that can be exchanged for gifts like phones, hotel rooms, and more. In the VIP rooms, there are hosts who guide high-rolling customers into the casino. When you visit, they take care of your hotel, transportation, and even meals. If you're betting big, they'll even send a helicopter to pick you up. Sometimes they even assist with shopping more thoroughly than a personal assistant. Many visitors may not realize that most of the VIP rooms are managed by gambling agents. Once they trust your abilities, they will be willing to lend you money from the casino. If you win, you can exchange it for cash immediately. If you lose, they will give you time to repay the money. This has developed into a highly refined business model. If you find the stakes at a table too low and want to increase your betting value, you can join higher stakes games like Drag 2 or Drag TF. Occasionally, you can even bet tens of millions of dollars. If you love gambling but hesitate to travel to Macau, there are services where you can place bets via phone. You simply need to download a Baccarat app and they will notify you of each round's score. You can tell them how much to bet, and they will follow your instructions. By now, you might wonder why so many people are so drawn to Baccarat. Is it because it's fair? Wrong. The allure lies in a hidden rule, one of the most sophisticated scams in the world, that makes every Baccarat player believe they can predict the game's outcome. Beyond gambling, Macau is also famous for its luxury clothing stores, jewelry shops, and nightclubs. The nightclubs in Macau are filled with the world's most beautiful women from 8 different countries. It's easy to get caught up in the extravagant, superficial atmosphere here. Every store tempts you to take out your wallet and spend money. The casinos surrounding these areas act like ATM machines, waiting to lure you in. I haven't mentioned this yet, but you'll be surprised when you realize that most of the restaurants around the casino areas don't serve ordinary dishes like Nha Trang food or Hong Kong cuisine. Instead, there are restaurants from all over China, including Northeastern, Sichuan, Hunan, and Shanghai cuisines. These familiar meals are specifically catered to visitors from mainland China. The biggest difference between Macau and Hong Kong is that while people in Hong Kong may act somewhat arrogantly toward customers from China, people in Macau are the opposite. They will bow and show the utmost respect to visitors from the mainland, even though, in their hearts, they may not hold them in high regard. But when it comes to money, the rule is simple. The one with the money is the king. Honestly, I've never really liked Macau. It's a city where one thing is crystal clear. Money comes first. While it might be more extravagant compared to places like Shanghai, Macau clearly reveals the utmost practicality of human nature. Even though my brother has worked in the gambling industry, I still want to sincerely advise you to stay away from it. Gambling is harmful, and it can lead you to your destruction without you even realizing it. Why do people keep playing until they lose everything? Sometimes they even borrow money to keep playing. The reason is simple. As long as there's hope, they'll keep trying. Most gamblers don't want to admit they are losers. Most people don't truly understand the dangers of gambling and how it can turn those around us into greedy, ugly individuals. A true gambling addict is not born that way. They were once just like everyone else, ordinary people who, due to a bit of greed, gradually get drawn into the abyss of gambling. One person once explained how an illegal casino operates at a certain location. It wasn't a casino, but a fraudulent organization disguised as one. Everyone involved had a specific role to play, and the money players lost wasn't just from gambling. It was because they were being deceived. Does that mean that by going to a legal casino like the ones in Macau, you will avoid the tragedy of losing all your money and having to borrow more to continue playing? The answer is certainly not. Gambling will ultimately lead to the destruction of your family and the loss of all wealth. Instead of saying you bet 10 and lose 10, it's better to say that you bet 10 and lose 10. Casinos in Las Vegas and Macau operate differently from illegal casinos. They don't need to spend too much time or effort to deceive their prey. They apply the principle of the big tree strategy, which I'll explain later. The main issue here is that many people don't truly understand gambling or the psychology of gambling addicts. That's why many people can't comprehend or help their loved ones or friends escape from gambling. Even those who are leaders in the fight against gambling cannot offer much help because they don't truly understand it. Gamblers are fully aware that it's not about the game itself, but a scam. So is it enough to find a legal and fair casino to gamble? No. Let me explain how an ordinary person, a loved one, or someone familiar to you can become a terrifying gambling addict. This process can be divided into 4 stages. The first stage, the awareness phase. In the beginning, when people first step into a casino, they are very cautious. They usually only bet small amounts, mainly for entertainment. When they win a few million, they tell themselves to stop. At this point, most people can still control themselves. However, once they win 100 million VND, they begin to fantasize that every time they go to the casino, they will win 100 million VND and leave. Macau is not only about gambling, but there are also many other forms of entertainment, which is an aside from the main point. As time passes, you will gradually fall into a cycle of searching for that 100 million with every visit. During this process, you will have a few lucky rounds where you win 100 million VND and leave. You will feel that this is easy, but then you will win anywhere from 50 million to 80 million VND, which isn't enough to meet your goal, so you keep playing. After that, you start losing, but since you had won earlier, you won't stop and continue playing to recover your losses. This is just a pathetic illusion of a gambler. Eventually, you accumulate more experience in gambling. Even if you lose 200 million VND, you'll still try to recover it. At some point, you'll realize that winning just 100 million VND isn't enough to make you leave. You continue to lose and try to recover, and during this process, 2 major changes happen. First, the amount of money you bet becomes larger. When you've already lost 200 million VND and want to recover it, you have no choice but to raise your bet. Second, you accumulate more experiences with wins and losses of 100 million, 200 million, or even 300 million VND, thinking that the next time you will recover it all. But remember, these experiences are merely setting you up for failure. Maybe at this point, you still don't fully understand the danger of these experiences. For example, there was a gambler in Macau who only had 10 million VND left. Feeling frustrated and losing his mind, he decided to bet everything on a pair in Baccarat. The odds were 1 in 11, meaning that if you knew the probabilities, the chance of winning was actually 1 in 13. But miraculously, he won and turned the situation around, winning big. After that, every time he had only a few chips left, he would always bet on pairs, but he never won again. Eventually, he realized that he had placed over 100 million VND on pairs, far exceeding what he had originally won. In the end, he lost everything. If he hadn't won the first time, he wouldn't have continued betting this way. This is the danger of accumulating gambling experiences. In the second stage, each gambler will experience disappointment after a major loss. One day, he lost 300 million VND. The memories of previous experiences resurfaced. The last time he lost 300 million but was able to recover, so he thought that he could just wait for luck to come back again. But this time, it seemed like he couldn't win. He kept losing, and his initial capital was depleted. This was the first time he felt like he was slipping in his gambling career. This loss marked a critical turning point that transformed him into a real gambler. This explains why gamblers keep playing until they lose everything. They don't want to admit defeat and always believe that they will win again, but those beliefs aren't strong enough to make them stop playing. However, the experiences of winning 3 billion VND or recovering 1 billion VND make it hard to stop, even if they have only 1 cent left. Eventually, they place all their bets, hoping to win everything back. In the third stage, they start compensating. What does compensating mean? It's when everything collapses, and they desperately try to repair the damage they've caused. After significant losses, gamblers try to find ways to fill the financial gaps they've created. Human nature is greedy. When they've lost money, they feel incredibly reluctant to let it go. There's a story in Macau about a person who used 1 billion VND to win 30 billion VND. The next day, he continued to gamble and lost all 31 billion VND. Eventually, he jumped off a building because he felt that he had lost everything. Now you understand, don't you? After going through a major collapse, a gambler only thinks about recovering. They always tell themselves that once they recover the money they lost, they'll never gamble again. But gamblers make this vow countless times, and yet they continue to lose. For example, when losing 20 billion VND, a rational gambler would realize they can't recover all their losses in one go. They start planning to recover, thinking that if one attempt doesn't work, they can try 10 times, recovering 2 billion VND each time. This is how they get sucked into the endless cycle of gambling. This story shows the deep psychological dependency of gamblers and the dangers of gambling. Gambling not only makes you lose your rationality, but also leads you into an abyss with no way out. It destroys families and harms society. That's why banning gambling is important. It protects people from falling into this trap and helps maintain a healthy, sober life. I hope that, after hearing these real stories, many of you will recognize the harms of gambling and stay away from it. Gambling is not just a simple form of entertainment. It's a bottomless pit. The stories of Stanley Ho and Lamin clearly illustrate the disastrous consequences gambling can have on individuals, families, and society. As Stanley Ho once said, "If you don't gamble, you win." This valuable lesson comes from his years of experience. People who become addicted to gambling often have a false sense of confidence about their luck. They think they can win and recover what they've lost. But the reality is, the more they delve into it, the harder it becomes to escape. Let's stay alert, avoid gambling, and appreciate the happy life we have now.